My name is Michelle and I am the Communications Manager at the TCM Group. I want to thank you for joining us today. Please do ask questions during the webinar, which will be answered at the end. I will now hand over to mediation expert David Liddell, who will be leading today's webinar.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and welcome to this webinar looking at how organisations are starting to make use of mediation as a tool for resolving those difficult issues that many organisations face: quarrels, disagreements, feuds, falling outs, not seeing eye to eye, challenge, disagreement, relationship breakdown. Perhaps on the more serious end of the wedge, we're talking about bullying, grievance, harassment, discrimination. I suppose what I'm talking about here, of course, is conflict, and conflict that happens in organisations. And mediation presents a very powerful and a very effective tool for organisations, an alternative way, perhaps, of handling some of these difficult situations. And by setting up a mediation scheme, it embeds mediation and the principles of mediation, which of course are around collaboration, dialogue, discussion. It embeds those into the culture of the organisation. And in doing so, organisations who I'm working with on a day-to-day basis are telling me that mediation is delivering real benefits, real value to the organisation. It's securing better, faster, more sustainable outcomes in those difficult situations that we know exist. And moreover, what it's doing as well is it's not just resolving disputes in a more sustainable way. What it's actually doing, and its very profound effect, is it's unlocking the potential in the human relationship that conflicts can stifle. And I'm talking in particular about innovation and creativity. When we experience conflicts and disputes, the negative effects of those in the workplace, people tell me they don't feel very creative, they don't feel like coming into work, they don't feel like they're participating fully. And that, of course, shows up as stress and absence and presenteeism, and of course HR departments are well equipped at measuring the fallout of conflict. Then in organisational terms, that has a significant and detrimental effect on the well-being of the organisation. So mediation doesn't just help to resolve the dispute, it helps to bring the parties together to find creative and innovative solutions that will help them work more effectively in the future and drive economic success within the business. So what we're going to look at today is the important role that mediation plays and how you and your organisations can embed mediation and develop mediation schemes which deliver tangible, sustainable results. Obviously, Vince Cable spoke the other day at the Lib Dem party conference, and he referenced his speech last year. And this is a quote from last year's Lib Dem speech. Obviously, Vince Cable, Secretary of State for Business, Innovation and Skills at BIS. We now face a crisis that is the economic equivalent of war. This is not a time for business as usual. Now, this speaks to me as a mediator, and it says to me that our organisational systems and processes in relation to dispute handling and conflict management aren't working effectively, certainly not working as effectively as they could do. Our reliance on adversarial processes to bring the parties to a resolution are systematically failing to address the root cause of conflict. And in many respects, the more adversarial processes that we have in some cases actually entrench the parties. They can perpetuate conflict, they can cause positions to become hardened, and paradoxically the very tools that are available to HRM managers to resolve disputes can make matters worse. So for a great many organisations, what we see is the organisation spends as much time trying to avoid going into process as they do managing the process when it happens. So during today's webinar, what I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about our organisation and what we've been doing to set up mediation schemes. I'm going to do that at the end of the presentation, by the way, so you'll find out a little bit more about our company and what we do. There's a couple of case studies I'd like to share with you from Marks & Spencer's and the University of Southampton in particular today. When I first set up mediation programs, the first mediation schemes I set up were back in 2001, 2002 in two London boroughs. It was much easier to make a case for mediation. We weren't under the same economic constraints as we are now. And I think it's right now that organisations are saying, hang on, we need mediation to deliver a real benefit, a measurable return on investment. So organisations, the successful organisations who are setting up mediation schemes, start off by being clear about what the business case is and what the business benefits of mediation will be. So we'll explore how to develop that business case and how to measure the benefits of mediation over the initial 36 months of setting up a mediation scheme. And finally, we will look today in today's webinar at some best practice hints and tips for helping to establish a mediation scheme. I'd like to just confirm, it's not an onerous process setting up a mediation scheme, but what you will be doing if you decide to take this step within your organisation is you'll be driving a significant change in culture within your business. We've become very used to a notion of entitlement. I'm entitled to certain things, and there's the notion of the entitlement culture. And what our organisation's policies do, and our justice systems perhaps, they reinforce that notion of entitlement. What mediation does is it reinforces the principle of responsibility, where the parties in a dispute take responsibility for the conflict and their behaviours in a conflict, and therefore they take responsibility for the resolution of their conflict and for changing behaviours for the future. That is a significant shift in emphasis from those processes that we've relied on for the last 30 or 40 years. So whilst it's not an onerous process per se to set up a mediation scheme, it is a journey. And I'd like to share with you some of my experiences and how organisations have managed that journey. You can't pick up an HR magazine or an employee relations journal at the moment without seeing mediation mentioned. It's clearly a buzzword, and having been in mediation for so many years now, I'm excited that so many people are talking about it. But unless you've been in a mediation process or trained as a mediator, there's still mystery surrounding what we mean by this term mediation. So here's a simple definition of mediation that I hope kind of clarifies what we're talking about. So mediation is a non-adversarial process of dispute resolution, and the mediator's role, the third party's role, is to help the parties come together to have an open and honest conversation. And the purpose of mediation is to help the parties explore their needs, their goals, their hopes, their fears, their aspirations, their emotions. And in having that level of an adult-to-adult exchange and dialogue, the mediator then helps the parties to craft a solution which is mutually acceptable to both parties. We call it principled negotiation. It's interest and needs-based outcomes which meet the interest and needs of all parties. It's a shift away from the positional bargaining that we see happening in so many dispute resolution processes. Of course, the mediator isn't there to judge, to blame, to tell the parties what to do. They don't make suggestions. They simply facilitate a process of dialogue. The parties enter the process voluntarily, and in doing so, it's the core emphasis of mediation is it's based on self-determination. They come into the process of their own volition, they reach a solution of their own volition. It's a non-legally binding process, it's without prejudice, it's a safe environment to have an open and honest conversation. From those of you in HR who know the value of the audit trail, you'll be horrified perhaps to hear, or maybe liberated to hear, that there are no notes taken in a mediation process, and if there are any scribblings or notes that have been taken, they are destroyed at the end of the mediation process before mediation concludes. So there's no scraps of paper flying around the organisation, nothing's going to appear in a bundle or in a subsequent grievance process. It's simply there to give the parties a chance to step out of whatever they're doing, whatever their issues are, come into a room with a skilled third party and find a solution. And mediators may be trained internal mediators as well as external mediators like those we have here at TCM. And our passion at TCM is to build internal mediation processes that are self-sufficient and based on mediation being delivered by the people who work within your organisations. The best mediators you have, you're already employing them, they're called your managers. We're not going to focus too much then. A previous webinar I've run, and I'm running one later in the year, looking at the role of manager as mediator. But in particular today we're going to look at the internal mediator. And the internal mediator is taken from a cross-section of your organisation who are trained and skilled and supported to be called upon whenever there's a complaint or a grievance, a dispute, a bullying or harassment allegation, and they can be mobilised quickly to bring the parties together to have these kind of conversations. And of course, most mediators now in the UK are subscribing to the professional standards set out by the Professional Mediators Association. So we're starting to see a professionalisation now of mediation, where in the past we've maybe been a slightly unregulated industry. So mediation is now increasingly recognised as best practice within the human resources and employment relations field. We're increasingly seeing CIPD and other bodies promoting mediation and recognising the value of that mediation brings. At a board level, there's an increasing recognition that the conflict has a significant impact on the bottom line. From the small micro business, 20, 30 employees, through to the giant global business, conflict costs money. It can be measured, it can be quantified, and chief operating officers, finance directors and others who are having to make really tough decisions around rationalising the business, reducing headcount, making redundancies, quite rightly now saying, well, how much are we spending on litigation? How much are we spending on compromise agreements? How many days are we losing to stress absence? How much time is being taken by our managers handling these situations? Why are HR spending so much time investigating disputes which should be resolved earlier? Why do we seem to be spending so much time at our employment tribunals? Why are our legal costs so high? Why are our insurance premiums so high? These are real issues that businesses are grappling with right now, and those questions are a key factor in why businesses are turning to a more cost-efficient, sustainable and economically advantageous process called mediation. And of course, mediation doesn't just operate in a vacuum outside of other processes that exist within your organisation. It underpins and supports good HR practice, good employment relations practice, but it also supports and underpins your commitment to employee engagement, well-being, and other initiatives within your organisation, perhaps in terms of handling change, reducing absence, improving performance, being a great company. I'm a big fan of Jim Collins' text, Good to Great. Mediation supports those. It supports investors in people. Customer first accreditation are now recognising mediation. We're seeing mediation increasingly used in consumer disputes, supply chain disputes. Mediation underpins and works alongside different elements of the business and operates clearly within the value chain of the business to deliver value. Going back to dispute resolution, I'm sure you'll remember the dreaded dispute resolution regulations, and there are still echoes of the dispute resolution regulations in most organisations. We haven't been given absolute clarity about what the real best alternative is to those. But of course, in 2007, Michael Gibbons was commissioned by the then Department for Trade and Industry to review the dispute resolution regulations, and his recommendation was for those to be repealed and replaced with a process which was focused more on early resolution and mediation. Well, the dispute resolution regulations were repealed. In terms of mediation, it featured twice in the ACAS code, and we saw the introductions of pre-claims conciliation. So there was a bit of tinkering done at the edges, but we did start to see a shift away from a reliance on formal process and a recognition that early resolution can deliver better and more sustainable outcomes. So that was embodied in the Employment Act 2008 and the ACAS Code, which I'm sure you're more than familiar with. But the coalition government at the moment, I'm sure you've been reading the headline announcements in relation to reduction on unfair dismissal claims, the modification to employment tribunal procedures, employment law reform. The key message coming out of this government is they would prefer to see disputes being handled at a local level within businesses without the need to go into employment tribunal. I'm clear in my conversations with ministers and senior civil servants at Ministry of Justice and BID that they are absolutely committed to procedural fairness. However, I'm also convinced that they can see procedural fairness being delivered more effectively within organisations who adopt a mediation programme and embed mediation into their grievance, their bullying, harassment, their performance management processes. And one of my slides in a short while will see mediation as a contributor to procedural fairness. One of the reasons the majority of organisations that I see go to employment tribunal is an absence of procedural fairness or lack of clarity about what that term means. In actual fact, when we look at those organisations who are using mediation right now, they demonstrate a clear commitment to procedural fairness, using an equal balance of adversarial and non-adversarial dispute resolution processes. If you only have adversarial dispute resolution processes in your organisation, and what I mean by that is that the ultimate sanction in that dispute resolution process is for a third party to reach a determination, and there is no arrangement in place for the parties to come together and have a dialogue or a conversation, a meaningful dialogue and conversation, then your processes are probably reliant on adversarial justice rather than a balance of adversarial and non-adversarial justice. So mediation is a form of non-adversarial justice, and the fair mediation model is a process that I've devised and has now been embedded into about 3,000 UK companies. It's a very simple model, as the best ones often are. The mediator's role in the fair model is, in the first instance, to facilitate the dialogue. We begin that long before the mediation process begins. We work with HR professionals and with managers to help them prepare the commitment for employees to come to mediation. We recognise it's a courageous and tough decision, and for most parties it's counterintuitive to come into a room with the very same person they're in a dispute with. Every nerve in their body is saying, don't put me in a room with this other person. And here we are saying the best way of resolving this is to go in a room with this other person. So we do a lot of work to build a commitment to mediate, and your mediators will be trained in helping to secure that commitment, and we provide support to HR and managers to develop that commitment. Of course, when the parties come together, the mediator's role is to facilitate that dialogue, facilitate to make easier. And we manage that. We establish a safe space, establish ground rules and boundaries, help the parties talk and listen to each other in a calmer, more rational, safer, more open and honest environment. It's what the parties say to us they want, but they don't have that opportunity. And once we've opened up the possibilities and the parties are engaging, we start to see those little moments of empathy and appreciation, recognition, understanding, insight, learning. But if I knew that, if I'd have known that, I wouldn't have said that. If you'd have told me that at the time, I wouldn't have sent you the email. Why didn't you come in and talk to me, the parties say. So the parties know the answers to their problems, and the mediator's role is to help develop those empathic connections. And in doing so, we start to see the parties become more innovative and creative in the kind of solutions that they need to be able to help rebuild their relationship tomorrow. And this is the beauty of the mediation process, and I've developed a model called the Insight Change Model, which reinforces this. There are, I suspect, and obviously I'm always happy to be proven wrong, but the benefit of hindsight is one of the most important elements of the mediation process. Based on what you now know happened yesterday, what will you do differently tomorrow? It's an obvious question. I'm asking, I've got a 3-year-old boy. I'm asking him that question all the time. Based on your knowledge of the impact of your behaviour, what will you do differently tomorrow? It's called learning. The mediation process reinforces learning based on the benefit of hindsight to encourage insight. I suspect in most dispute resolution processes in organisations, grievance mechanisms, bullying and harassment, the process only stops at what happened yesterday. There's very little focus on learning from that experience and focus on what needs to be done tomorrow. Mediation is completely different. It's future focused. It allows us to learn from the mistakes that we've made, the challenges that we faced, and then build a stronger relationship going tomorrow, an innovative, creative solution. And the final message in the FAIR model is to resolve. And resolve has two meanings. Of course, the obvious meaning perhaps is resolution, an outcome. And those people who sometimes think of mediation as a pink and fluffy, touchy-feely excuse me, option are often amazed at just how powerful and challenging it is. And by two parties coming together in a room, just the strength and profound transformative effect that it can have on those parties. And the second meaning of resolution is the resolve, the commitment. And what we find from the parties who've gone through a mediation process is they are just more committed to the outcome. They're more committed to each other. It strengthens their engagement in the organisation. Suddenly they feel like getting out of bed in the morning. Suddenly they feel like talking to each other. Suddenly they feel like participating again in the organisation. And those organisations, yourselves and others, who need to be strong at this time of economic challenge, need to have a motivated, engaged workforce. Disputes hinder that. Mediation opens up and facilitates it. So the successful organisation thinking about moving into a mediation program sees conflict very, very differently than perhaps we do. The old approach of mitigating conflict, seeing it as a necessary evil, having procedures which, if you like, channel the conflict to an outcome where one person wins and the other loses, really are no longer fit for purpose, and I think the evidence supports that. Organisations who see conflict as a natural, inevitable, positive, healthy expression of their organisation, who understand and recognise that most teams, all teams according to Adam Tuckman, are going to go through a storming phase. So conflict is inevitable. So the challenge isn't how do we prevent it from happening. It's how do we cope with it when it does happen to harness the potential opportunities. And mediation helps to harness those possibilities and opportunities. It promotes understanding, it cements relationships, it builds cohesion, absolutely critical fabric of a strong, robust, resilient workforce in any organisation. So the first of our case studies is looking at BT experience, and BT have been nominated for one of this year's National Mediation Awards, which are very exciting for their work. So we've been working very closely with BT for the last 3 or 4 years to embed mediation. And we started off with a pilot in BT Retail. It's now been rolled out across the whole of the BT group. And BT Retail, as with many organisations, I don't think they were unique here at all, recognised that the culture in the organisation was we didn't really have much choice. You either tried to resolve it without involving HR, or if you did go to HR, it kind of formalised things really quickly. So people either saw HR as being part of the problem, worked around HR, or if it did become formalised, they lost control of it. It became very formal grievance. And they were very keen to put an end to that at BT, with real benefits to that organisation. And the real selling point for them was the ability to move away from that formal process and to get in early, to address issues quickly and bring the parties together to promote positive conversations. And BT Retail have benefited, as have BT Group, significantly from the introduction of mediation. As Carol Russell says so passionately, everybody wins with mediation. No one loses. So how can you as an organisation begin to take mediation and embed it into your systems, processes and culture? So another case study, an interesting experience here from Marks and Spencer, again another large organisation. Marks and Spencer's were interested in mediation. They'd done some work with ACAS as a result of the 2008 Act. And then they came to TCM to help expand their organisation. And what Philip Edwards says at ACAS is it's making a significant difference to their organisation in the way that they handle conflicts and disputes. And we're working closely with Marks and Spencer's now to roll this out across every one of their 65,000 employees across Marks and Spencer's. So Philip Edwards and others within large retailers are starting to see mediation as being a significant contributor to effective employment relations within their organisations. So who mediates for organisations who've taken that leap into establishing a mediation scheme? Well, as I said at the start of the webinar, you already employ the best mediators you could possibly have. They're called your managers. So we'll often start with organisations to look at the role of leaders and managers and to develop the capability, the confidence and the competence for leaders to spot problems early, to bring the parties together and to have a difficult conversation. And you know something, it doesn't take weeks and months or years to train a manager. They're already doing this on instinct, on best practice, on good judgment in many cases. We can train managers in the course of a day to spot problems early and to have the confidence to bring the parties together, to have a difficult but important conversation, to forge an outcome which is going to resolve the dispute and in essence to nip those issues in the bud. It's an absolutely key way of delivering effective dispute resolution in any business. Sometimes, of course, managers just aren't the right people for whatever reason. They might be conflicted. They might be part of the conflict. They might know one of the parties as a friend or on a social basis. There could be any number of reasons why the manager's not the right person. So in organisations who've embedded a mediation scheme, they often then train a team of internal mediators. And those internal mediators are trained, they're accredited, they work as peers within the organisation, so they know your business, they keep it in-house. You haven't got, it contains the conflict, but you've got a group of people who can be mobilised quickly when there is a grievance or dispute. The average time it takes for a dispute to be identified and for mediators to be allocated is 10 working days. Most organisations can't even get terms of reference for an investigation set up within 10 working days. But the mean average for mediation schemes that we set up, it takes 10 days to get the mediators on in situ to help the parties to resolve their disputes. Supporting the internal mediators are big M mediators, external mediators, people who do this as a day job. We have a team of highly skilled, experienced mediators here at TCM working to support organisations, and we tend to get called in the more sensitive issues, discrimination cases, serious harassment issues, really tough bullying cases, or multi-party disputes. But even where we've set up a mediation scheme and we're called in as external mediators, we still have a commitment to supporting the internal mediators. So we'll often pair up with the internal mediators, or we'll take our learning and knowledge and build that into a continuing professional development program. So our entire modus operandi is helping your scheme become more effective, more professional, and more self-sufficient. So why bother? What are the benefits of mediation? What's the return on investment? What's the bang for the buck? Well, I think what you would see and see very quickly in our organisations, a great example, I've just done some research in partnership with NHS employers looking at NHS trusts. Of the 133 NHS trusts who responded to the survey this summer, over 80% of those trusts are using mediation now to resolve disputes, and incredibly, over 40% of those trusts who are using mediation have seen a significant fall in the number of employment tribunal cases that they've been receiving. That is a major impact, financial impact on the NHS at a time whereas with any public sector organisations, the issues of cost and resources are absolutely critical. So mediation is driving a real financial benefit to that organisation. We see a reduction in investigations, legal costs, compromise agreements. I'll come back to compromise agreements shortly. Reduction in absence and stress. Mediation supports the health and safety executives management standards, and there's a great case study of a mediation scheme that we set up of an NHS trust on the health and safety executive website, the Royal Free Hospital, talking about how they've used mediation to meet the HSC's management standards on health and safety. So we start to see real benefits in terms of, if you like, the allocated costs. And then those which are perhaps a little bit more difficult to allocate, productivity, goodwill, resilience, cohesion, collaboration, we start to see these increase. Again, these can be measured and quantified, and those schemes who we've been working with work hard to measure these and to measure the real impact and the real benefit to those schemes. So here are some helpful hints, and we'll come shortly, by the way, to a toolkit that we've designed here at TCM to help you measure the cost of conflict and to measure the impact. So if you're wondering how to do this, and I'm going to share with you a very powerful tool in a moment that will help you to have this, to measure this, and I'll send this out to all of the people on this webinar. I'll send the toolkit out to you as well, so you'll have something that you can use practically to help you measure the cost of conflict shortly. But here are some helpful hints to help you think about mediation and to embed it into your organisation. The first thing is to think about developing a dispute resolution strategy, a project plan. Let's give this project some discipline, some structure, some focus, because I think any other project that operates in the business would have those. So mediation doesn't have special dispensation to operate in a non-project management environment. The way that we develop the strategy is, the first thing is to undertake the toolkit to measure the cost of conflict to your business. We then provide a focus group and impact assessment, normally over half a day with key stakeholders to gather qualitative data. And we also undertake, in partnership with clients, an employee survey to measure their experiences of conflict. We pull all of that data together and produce a short report, and that short report also includes recommendations for the next 3 years in terms of embedding the mediation program. We also, at this stage, I start to identify key performance measures to help you to measure your return on investment. So an organisation's priority might be to reduce stress and stress-related absence. So we'd start to look at how to measure the impact of mediation there. Another organisation might want to reduce the amount of money that's been spent on compromise agreements and ETs. Again, that would be one of the KPIs. So the KPIs are very much bespoke to the organisation's needs and goals. We then set up a dispute resolution system, and the dispute resolution system sounds a bit fancy really, but it's called Apaxio, and in essence that contains all of the templates, the documents, case management system. It's a full online dispute resolution system that organisations use to manage their mediation scheme, to set it up. It's got intranet sites, leaflets, pamphlets. It just helps organisations not have to reinvent the wheel. All of the information has been benchmarked against other mediation schemes, so it's been tried and tested and is trusted information. We then work with organisations to embed mediation into relevant policies and procedures, and this is really important here. I was talking earlier about procedural justice and how mediation, and procedural fairness rather, and how mediation supports procedural fairness. I can only think about myself being in conflict. If I'm in conflict with one of my colleagues or a manager, and someone offers me mediation, maybe an HR business partner, and I haven't read about it anywhere in the organisation, my response would probably be, yeah, don't experiment on me with one of your newfangled ideas. Thank you very much. I'll stick to the old tried and tested procedure, even with whatever the failings of that process are. So having mediation visibly stated within your policies and procedures sends out a clear message to all of your key stakeholders that you take this process very seriously. And a little hint here as well, what you can do is, whilst you have a statutory requirement to offer a grievance process that meets the ACAS code, and of course there can be an uplift of award of up to 25% ET if you fail to follow your own grievance procedure or meet the minimum standards set down by ACAS, there is no statutory requirement for you to call it a grievance procedure. What a lot of our client organisations are looking at now is changing the name from grievance to grievance resolution procedure or a dispute resolution procedure. So long as that procedure has all of the requirements that are laid down in the ACAS code, you can also balance in your dispute resolution procedure or grievance resolution procedure a commitment to mediation. And it's amazing. I'm going to ask you to think about the words that you associate with the word grievance. People often say to me the word grievance sounds like time-consuming, dogma, positions, anger, frustration, hurt, bitterness. But when we think about the word resolution, it feels more future-focused. It feels like it's about getting solutions, it's going forward. And simply by introducing the word resolution into your grievance processes, it can change the mindset of people coming to you looking for support to find dispute resolution. So, and that's a very powerful way of driving dispute resolution. I've highlighted number 4 because this is probably where the biggest bulk of the work is done. We will work alongside you to recruit and select a team of mediators, and we provide everything that you need to do that: job descriptions, application forms, and so on. And then we deliver training for a team of mediators. Teams tend to range from maybe 2 mediators in a small business up to, we've trained mediators in Transport for London, Department for Work and Pensions, BT and others, and I think in those organisations we've trained upwards of 50, 60 plus mediators. So the scale of the team is very much matched to the size of your business and what your objectives are. But let's assume there's a team of between 6 and 12. We would come on site to your organisation and deliver the training to an accredited standard, and your mediators would then receive the National Certificate in Workplace Mediation. So they would have gone through a really challenging training course. It's delivered over 6 days, which are 2 blocks of 3-day study. It's fully accredited and assessed by professional mediators. It's providing a benchmark standard really for your mediators. Then of course the hard work starts. It's about getting people who really aren't sure about mediation into mediation, and that can be hard and tough work. So we develop mediation champions in the organisation. We involve all key stakeholders throughout the process: union, staff side, occupational health, senior managers, board, HR professionals, employment relations professionals. So a lot of work is done around stakeholder engagement, but then it's about communicating and publicising the scheme and letting people know what you're doing. And finally, it's continually measuring and evaluating the impact of your mediation scheme. Most mediation schemes that we work with deliver demonstrable financial benefits. I can't think of any schemes that haven't benefited financially, apart from perhaps the early ones who are just in the formative stages. And we will help you to identify what those benefits are and then create reports up into the board so they can see the real impact that you're driving in your organisation. And what HR professionals say to me is it adds real value to the HR function. And it's a good news story. In the current climate, mediation is good news for businesses. So here's the toolkit I was referencing shortly, and as I said, we'll get this out by email to everyone on this webinar, so you've got this. It's toolkit / fancy name for an Excel spreadsheet. But in essence, this is a summary of the toolkit. But what you'll receive from us is a spreadsheet, and what we recommend to any organisation thinking about mediation is go back over your files from the last 12 months. And of course, being HR professionals, if that's your background, you'll have undertaken audit trails, so you should be able to undertake a fairly forensic level analysis of grievances, bullying and harassment cases from within your organisation. And there's always an HR assistant somewhere who's keen to get experience of quantitative and qualitative methods, so this might be a job for them. And then through that, just plug in the amount of time that each of the different players took at each of the stages. The toolkit includes internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, any agreements that you reach through compromise agreement, settlement agreements obviously when they come in, and employment tribunal. Run that through a sample population of between 3 and 5 disputes, and that will then give you a mean cost of conflict to your organisation. And I think you'll be surprised at just how much it's costing the organisation. It's not until we start to tally up those figures that we start to realise this is having a significant impact. There are no industry standards per se. The most expensive mean cost we've ever seen is £40,000. Other organisations, it might be around £5,000 or £6,000. So there's no standard. This is very much about your organisation. There's no right or wrong answer here. And then by introducing the Apaxio system, as I've mentioned, the case management system, it helps you to set up your mediation program and begin to make sense of this. So you would then record all of the data from your mediation cases, so you'd know your mean cost of conflict, you'll understand the effect on the business, and then by using the Apaxio system, as you can see some screenshots here, you will start to be able to measure the return on investment through assessing the cost and the time taken for each mediation. And you should, over a period of time, start to see your cost of conflict reduce until you've started to see a significant reduction. One large London borough that we worked with, in the 3 years that we setting up a mediation program, they were inundated with employment tribunal claims. They saw a reduction of a staggering 80% reduction in the employment tribunals that one London borough received within 3 years of setting up a mediation program. That mediation was operating with a couple of other initiatives. It's always difficult to say, was it just mediation? But I think it's reasonable to say that mediation played a significant part in what was a major drop-off in employment tribunal claims. So going back to your grievance and bullying and harassment policies and thinking about procedural fairness within those, adversarial justice does not equal procedural fairness, by the way. It's not the only way to ensure that your processes are fair. So by taking a green pen and a red pen, this is a great task to do, by the way. It's really visual. Is with a red pen, mark all of the parts of your existing policies which are adversarial, punitive, divisive, which result in a win-lose outcome, sanctions, culpability, blame, and so on. And with a green pen, mark all of those parts of your policy which are about dialogue, consensus building, discussions, collaboration, win-win outcomes. And if you've got more than a few lines of green pen on your policy, please do email it across to me and I'll put it up on our website as an example of best practice. Most organisations are heavily reliant, even without even knowing it, heavily reliant on adversarial processes. Now, I believe strongly that adversarial processes have an important part to play in the good discipline within an organisation. Absolutely key. There has to be red ink. However, I believe really strongly that there should be an equal balance of red and green ink. And a truly effective dispute resolution process within an internal mediation scheme has an equal balance of the green and the red ink. And when you secure that equilibrium within your organisation, and when you have a team of internal mediators, you have a commitment to mediation, it's part of your culture, it's part of your conversations, it's just a normal way that we do business, it's called talking to each other. When that's part of the norms within your organisations will secure competitive advantage. There'll be great places to work, great places to do business with. Organisations will deliver best value, they'll meet the needs of their communities and their customers far more effectively. I genuinely believe that the balance between these two forms of justice are key to developing an internal mediation scheme. And this is a list of the organisations who agree. These are the organisations who are saying, yes, we buy into this, we want this in our business. So these are the schemes where we set up the organisations where we've set up mediation schemes. And the list is growing. And as I mentioned at the start of the webinar, it's the National Mediation Awards tomorrow. We've got nominations from Lloyds Banking Group, from EDF Energy, from British Telecom, from local authorities, NHS trusts, probation trusts. These organisations are celebrating the effect that mediation is having within their organisations and coming together to win awards and accolades for the amazing work that they're doing. So I'm really looking forward to the event, and perhaps some of you will be there tomorrow. So this is a little bit about our organisation and what we do. I won't spend too long on this. We're really happy to have conversations, and we specialise in setting up mediation schemes. Our mediation scheme coordinator, Megan Arlinghouse, is someone that we've had in business for 12 months or so now, and Megan's sole job is to provide support to in-house mediation schemes that we set up at every stage. So if organisations are thinking about setting up a mediation scheme, we are here to help. And we're not one of those consultancies that charge for every activity. We provide support. We know it takes time. We can come on site and deliver presentations. We can talk at seminars. We can talk at webinars. We can undertake a whole array of activities to support you set up your mediation scheme. So please do talk to us. Southampton University, another case study. A lot of work we've done with them, and recently they've developed their scheme so it's not just workplace disputes, but it also incorporates student complaints. And they were, like many organisations, really experiencing high levels of grievances, and they were draining for everyone involved. And mediation and working with our organisation just provided a different option. And I just think that's such a powerful way of describing mediation. It's not a panacea, it's not a silver bullet, it's not going to resolve every issue overnight. But it's a different and potentially a much more powerful way of resolving it. It gives people a choice. So in conclusion, for today's session, I suppose I have to declare an interest here, so forgive me, but I genuinely believe mediation is the right way forward. I think, and I've seen evidence now that suggests to me it's a powerful and profound contributor to organisational health and well-being. It's the most effective form of dispute resolution available. There can not be an out-of-the-box solution to mediation. It has to be crafted around your organisation's needs and goals, and we work closely with organisations to develop that bespoke approach. But by developing a holistic and strategic approach, it's going to catch people's attention. It's going to be seen as being a professional part of your organisation, securing key stakeholder buy-in, embedding into policies and procedures. And you will see the benefits, the human benefit and the return on investment in financial terms. And mediation works. It's very, very powerful. So what happens next? Well, obviously the webinar is free of charge. John. On.
Hello there. Apologies for the interruption there. I'd like to hand back now to David Liddell.
Hi everyone. Sorry about that. Something happened with the line on the something happened with the line on the webinar there. So we're coming to the end of the presentation. So we're going to come off the PowerPoint slide. I'm not quite sure what happened, but as I was saying, the next steps would be an on-site meeting if you felt that would be useful to take this conversation forward and to discuss mediation further. We can provide training through open courses that we deliver here in London and Manchester, or provide training on site. That can range from a one-day course through to our fully accredited 6-day National Certificate in Workplace Mediation. We deliver an array of mediation services, so if you've got a difficult situation on your desk right now, you need some support, whether it's in between two parties or in a team, please do contact us and test us out, and we can prove to you just how good we are and how powerful this mediation process is. We can undertake an audit or an assessment of the cost of conflict in your organisation and support you to develop a conflict strategy. Or you might have other ideas, and again, please do contact us for any support that you might need. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for staying with us. Apologies again about the technological problem at the end of that. So I'm available through LinkedIn, on Twitter, email, on our website. I'll send a little email out after this with the toolkit that I mentioned. So please do contact me directly with any further questions. But I'll say thank you very much at this stage and look forward to the prospect of working with you in the future. Thank you very, very much indeed. Bye-bye.
I hope you've enjoyed today's webinar. Our next webinar will be an introduction to mediation. If you have any feedback or questions on today's webinar, please do email us at info@TCM Group or call us on 0207 092 3184. Many thanks, and once again, apologies for the technical problems. Goodbye.